What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Full-time reaction to Dundee 2, Celtic 0 here at Dens. Martin, I thought a dreadful day for us. Really sore one. You're coming off that Motherwell game after the break thinking, is that going to have galvanised us a wee bit? Hopefully get a comfortable win here and start this run of fixtures, but that's arguably the worst performance we've seen all season. That
Definitely. I thought the first half in particular we were really passive. I thought we weren't winning the first balls and we definitely weren't winning the second balls. I thought Dundee they looked like they were high in confidence. We looked like we're the opposite, really low in confidence, and of course there's a number of factors, but the primary factor, by everything else that's happening surrounding the team on and off the pitch, the primary factor is that team just looked like they weren't good enough today, whether it be the players that were on the bench or players that were on the pitch. Were second to every ball, and it's the opposite to what you expected today. You thought huge game for us. Hearts obviously putting a little bit of pressure on with the result yesterday, and an opportunity for us to go and get a good start in this really difficult run of 7 games in 22 days. And we thought today, on paper, in theory, was an opportunity to get off to a good start, try and win today, try and get a win on Thursday, and then go into the game at Tynecastle next week with a couple of wins behind us, for what is a tricky period with a squad that's not particularly strong. We don't have a lot of strength and depth, but let's try and get off to a good start. And it was a polar opposite of that today. I thought we were really passive in the first half, a little bit different in the second half when that came, and so much as we played in their third of the pitch, we had the lion's share of possession. I think Dundee had some in the region of 17 or 18% possession. I'm sure I've seen it at the end of the game, but that stat's immaterial if you can't score goals. So what I did feel in the second half was, well, there was a lot of balls going out wide, and then the crosses were coming in, and we were just struggling to take advantage of those. A lot of good crosses came in a very dangerous areas of the pitch, but we weren't clinical enough in that area of the pitch, and we all know that's one of the pitches, and one of the areas on the pitch that we didn't strengthen, and here we are facing the consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you lose games, there's always it seems like the easy go-to to say that the desire wasn't there and the hunger wasn't there, but I don't think you can really draw any other conclusion. We can talk a wee bit more tactically in a minute, but I think, as you say, with second balls, at set pieces, we don't look aggressive enough. We don't look like we've got the hunger. We look really like the shell of a Celtic team we've come to expect recently.
And I think, the very least you can expect at Celtic, and people say, well, why you expect that at Celtic and not at other clubs? Well, you probably expect it at every club. You expect it all the way back to school football, boys club football. But certainly at the very top, when you're playing for the club that's dominated Scottish football for so long now, and these guys get well paid, a good package to play for the club, there's an expectation that you'll give your all. You'll go out and you'll fight hard. I think it starts to break down when you've got 11 players starting and 1 or 2 aren't quite at the races. But it's really difficult when you've got the lion's share of those 11 players who are not at the races. I mean, I'll be watching, as I do every week, watching your predicted team. So hard to predict that starting 11 just now because there's so many underperformers. I think possibly the keeper, Scales and Carter Vickers, and arguably the captain, although I think the captain starts every week for me. Maybe Hatate, and there's lots of debate over those two as well, but that's it. And then the guys that are coming off the bench aren't necessarily any better, and that's why we're scratching our heads and saying, well, what's our best 11? And that's probably the biggest worry, is we can't get any continuity with regards to selection. And if we did have continuity, we'd probably be crying out for the players that are sitting on the bench to come on, because we don't feel the starting 11 is good enough. So when you've got that lack of effort, lack of desire, and then you've got you're low in confidence for a wide range of reasons, and then there's a question mark over some of the core technical ability to win consistently, which is what's required at this club. You need to be winning Europe, you need to win the cup games, and of course you need to get some consistency in the league ordinarily, because normally there's somebody pushing you, and this year it's Hearts as opposed to Rangers. So we're going to have to find some forms from somewhere before January, when the opportunity comes around to spend some money, and hopefully we'll do that. But in the interim period, and it's a really busy period, we've got to get through the rest of October, all November and all December, and there's a lot of games in that period.
It's so hard to see where a change could come from. I think most of the players, if not all of them, seem like they're going through the motions. You talked about some of the big players there that we've come to rely on over the years, the likes of Carter Vickers, who I think has been an absolute shadow of himself all season. Pulls the pillar at the post today, the same as Scales. Carter Vickers obviously loses a man for the first goal for the set piece. I think Scales gets beat on the counter for the second goal. Into midfield, McGregor's out of form. Hatate's another one. I think with the likes of Carter Vickers and Hatate, I remember saying last season when we had that malaise towards the end, and people were saying, well, we've just switched off because we're so far ahead. I thought we need to be careful that this isn't players coming to the end of their cycle who have seen it all and done it all at Celtic, and they don't have that hunger anymore. And I think that's what you're looking at. And then allied to that, we've lost key players who were really good for us, who contributed loads and loads of goals and assists, and we've replaced them with really subpar players. And then we go to the bench, we change the shape in the second half, and it didn't really get much better. We huffed and puffed, and like you say, we threw some balls into the box, but nobody in the right areas, and we just don't look like we've got any cutting edge going forward either. So it's really difficult to see what the manager can change. But having said that, I think the manager is really part of the malaise. You can't look at what Celtic have done in the last 9 months. I mean, we've talked a lot recently over this run about the big games. The games against Rangers, haven't won any. The cup final, an absolute no-show. We scored a goal in the cup final and then just let the game get away from us and lost it to an Aberdeen team who have really struggled for months on end. The exit to the Champions League, the game at Ibrox there, even you can look at the first home game in Europe against Braga as well. I don't expect Celtic to do this because we've seen situations like this before, but if Brendan Rodgers is just going to come to the end of his contract here, and he's chucked it as well, if he's mentally checked out, he's thinking about his next move, there's no potential for a new contract on the horizon. Is there a potential the club need to look at changing things before? Because if this is what we're going to watch, we can't just keep going all season with this sort of malaise.
Yeah, and I often get accused of being a happy clapper and all that stuff on this channel, and genuinely I'm not. My glass is always half full rather than half empty, but it's really hard just now not to be pessimistic and concerned and negative about what's going on around the club. I think the manager's a really interesting one. I'm a big Brendan Rodgers fan, and I often ask the question to see, right, Brendan moves on, who comes in? You know, does Ange come back, for example? Some fans are crying out for that already. I still believe Brendan Rodgers is a top class manager, and loads of people will disagree with me today, and that's fine. Football's all about opinions. The bit about staleness, I've heard you talking about that quite a bit before, and I get it. And it happens when you start to become a little bit complacent. Again, what you need at Celtic is you need players that complacency doesn't set in because it's in their DNA that they're not that type of person. They're the type of person that works hard because that's what they believe you should do, not just at a club like Celtic, but in anything that you do in life. And I think back to the last time Dundee beat us, I think it was up here as the one that's been called out 37 years ago. I mean, I was a young teenage boy. You I'm sure neither of you were here way back then 37 years ago, but I was, and I was watching my team win a double in a centenary year, and I remember it fondly. And the players that played for the club back then in 1988, which was the last time we won, or last time we were defeated up here in Dundee, we won the double that year, didn't we? Yeah. A lot of those players were grafters, but they were also committed to the club, and of course one of them being the great Paul McStay was round about then. And then you had players like, how much would they love to have Frank McAvenny in that team today? Players like that, Roy Aitken, all those types of players that they put their heart and soul into playing for Celtic, and they didn't think about it. And of course back then it was completely different when it comes to money and remuneration, and players being tempted potentially to move on to other clubs for a variety of reasons. But a lot of those were players who either had an affiliation to the club, or they were Scottish players, or for whatever reason, you know, some foreign players in that team as well. But there was a real togetherness in that team, and they all worked really, really hard for each other, and they weren't thinking about, I'm bored, I've been here 3 years now, I'm all of a sudden I'm bored playing for Celtic. How can you be bored playing for Celtic? There's something wrong with you if you're bored playing for Celtic, right? And I'm not saying Celtic's the biggest and the best club in the world, but it's a pretty glamorous life.
It's not bad.
And if you're bored playing for Celtic, there's something far, far wrong, whether you've been here for 10 minutes or 10 years. And often players will say, well, I move away from Celtic and I regret it. You know, I wish I hadn't moved away. A lot of them, and Ange Postecoglou might be thinking that right now, the situation he's in, but a lot of them should be eternally grateful that they've got the opportunity to play for this club. And a lot of them need to look themselves in the mirror and say, am I giving it all? Because we can blame the manager, and the manager has to take some accountability without doubt. But if you're not going out there and giving it 100%, and you're not coming off, you know, and your shirt's sodden, and you're, you know, you need to jump in a hot bath or a cold bath because you've given your all, then there's something far wrong. You shouldn't be playing for that club. But I couldn't agree with you more. It does look as if a lot of players aren't giving their all, and there's a good reason for that. You could look at players like Maeda in recent weeks. Why is he not giving his all? Because he wasn't allowed to leave the club, and there's a wee bit of petulance in there where he's feeling sorry for himself. To some extent you understand that, but for some of these other guys where that's not the situation, why wouldn't you be out there giving your all for Celtic? I wish we had that 1988 team playing today, I really do.
Aye, it's a difficult situation. Thinking about how the manager changes it, I know midfield has been a huge talking point. He goes with that 3 again today. You think about these big games we've got coming up, it seems like insanity to keep putting the same players out there when he's getting that sort of output. But I mean, I'll put this question to you, Martin. I suppose if you could answer it, you might well be in there managing the team. I know it's a difficult one, but what else can he do? Is it change personnel? Obviously the tactical approach of the team is criticised a lot because we are too slow. We're too considered in possession, too slow in the build-up. That was the case again today. But whether it's personnel, tactically, what do you see that we can do differently to try and change this?
It's a brilliant question. If it was obvious, Brendan would be doing it. But I will attempt to answer your question. I think we need to get to some extent back to basics. Some slight changes in the way that we play. Although Celtic got a style of play and they play the ball out wide, and they'll go back if it's necessary to go back, and it's a lot to do with ball retention. I think the big thing for me is winning the first ball, and if you don't win the first ball, you win the second ball, and that's a basic requirement for me. And I think if we can get back to doing that, so I think the work ethic, the desire to win that second ball, I think the technical part is, the players have got the ability that they've got, but they should still be much better than some of these other teams because they get paid far more and on paper they're better players. I think what Brendan needs to do is and he's still trying to do this, is pick his best 11 and probably show faith in that 11, because the more and more you change them. I'm watching that today, and Hatate went off, and I don't think he was upset at going off, but the top came off right away, and I think the top came off partly because he'd went off at a certain area of the pitch where you'd be expected to take your top off, so it doesn't look like you're still one of the players, confusing his own teammates, never mind the opposition. But it didn't look like he was annoyed. But I think the more and more you chop and change the players start to doubt their ability, and there's a little bit of self-pity. I think he needs to pick his best 11 and stick with it, and show some faith in that 11, and then those 11 need to repay the manager's faith by giving. You can't give 110%, I don't know why people ever say that, but give 100% and show some desire to at least win the first ball, if not the second ball. I mean, I spoke about already, but the number of times that we put a cross into a brilliant area, and you have to give some credit to Dundee, they defended incredibly well, but we should be in there winning headers. We should be in there, first time the ball comes in, not having to take a touch, just hitting it first time, and we should have scored 2 or 3 goals in that game. I'm not saying we deserved anything from the game. Dundee deserved the result that they got, and we deserved to get beat, but we should have been scoring a couple of goals in there, and sometimes it was just that split second additional effort, as I say, sometimes anticipating, sometimes just that being ready for the ball when it comes in rather than waiting on the cross coming in and then reacting, being a bit more proactive. I think if we could focus on that and see a shift in the players' mentality, and a lot of that's coming from confidence, so the whole disconnect between the fans and the board, and then that translates onto the pitch, that's not helping. I'm not saying that I don't necessarily want to say what my views are on it. I've got my own personal views on it, but I don't want to criticise any fan who's behaving in whatever way they're behaving. But what we do need to do is we need to get a bit of confidence around the club, whether it be the fans or the team. We need to reconnect, and the manager's talked about that a lot as well. He said, if there's a bad atmosphere in the stands and the fans are in a bad place, it translates on the players, and that's what it feels like. I feel like that again today. Tennis balls at the start, and we get off to a bad start in the game. Before you know it, we're 2-0 down. I think some commentary we went in, but it was a double fault. We went in 2-0 down. It was all the tennis analogies, but it just felt like the start of the game. Well, here we go again, and the players going to be able to lift themselves. I mean, they should be able to. They're professionals. They should be able to.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I was going to say on that is I remember a game here before where the fans threw some tennis balls onto the pitch under Ange. Remember the first season? It was in protest about Bernard Higgins maybe being recruited by the club, and the team went on, played brilliantly, won comfortably, and I think you need to have a degree of resilience as a Celtic player. You've talked about all the mental attributes you need to have, how committed you need to be, and I think you need to be strong enough to overcome that, because it's at the start of the game. You've still got a 90-minute game of football to play, and you've got to show your resilience to be able to deal with that. I think the resilience and these mental things are intangible. We've talked about the tangibles, the tactics, the personnel. My concern is that if you lose the energy and it gets away from you, it's very difficult to repair, particularly in a situation where the manager's future's uncertain. How does that translate to the players when the manager's future's uncertain? Some of the players, we've talked about them, key players, think their future's uncertain as well. I think that doesn't make for a good mix in terms of the appetite of the team, the desire, the hunger, and I rack my brains to think of examples where everybody knows a manager is departing and you've got some staleness in the squad with players wanting to go as well. I struggle to think of a situation that's turned out well like that.
Yeah, I know. And what does he do? Does he turn to the likes of Donovan and players like that who've maybe got a bright future ahead of them and trust in players like that, but there's a bit of rawness, and some of those players maybe got a mistake in them as well. Is he in a position to take those chances, or does he want to rely on the ones that have got a bit more experience? Because often managers in that situation, when their reputation's at risk, they're just thinking about results rather than long term. They're not thinking short term, and sometimes they'll make the wrong short term decisions because the long term doesn't come into it. So I couldn't agree with you more in the whole tennis ball thing. It felt like Celtic were try to play with a tennis ball today. Some of the play, and
Even better off.
they would have been better off playing with tennis, maybe more chance of scoring. But it's a combination of factors. You wish you could just put your finger on it, but a bit of disillusionment amongst the players for a wide range of reasons. Some of them don't look 100% fit. Some of the others maybe don't want to be there, which defies belief. What's the manager's long-term commitment to the club? He's feeling a bit disillusioned as well because of the whole transfer situation and the staleness in there, and of course a high percentage of the fans are feeling a bit deflated as well. Having said all of that, and yes, we're 4 points behind Hearts. What a huge game that is next week. Now you almost go there having to win, and certainly have to avoid defeat next week, and just try and hang in there as we come through this tough period, because I genuinely don't believe, looking at that Hearts team, that they're full of superstars, but what they have got is they've got confidence. And that confidence goes a long way in any sport. We've talked about psychology today, we're getting a bit deep today, aren't we? But that confidence makes a huge difference. They've got it, we've not, so we need to try and find from somewhere some resilience, some inner strength, some confidence, and try and get a settled team that's going to dust themselves down and go again. But huge game on Thursday, even bigger game arguably, in fact, no doubt about it, even bigger game on Sunday. We go to Tynecastle in the Cauldron at Tynecastle, lunchtime kick-off. Really looking forward to it, but definitely apprehension from the person whose glass is always half full. And then a run of games thereafter that are very difficult. We've got a cup semi-final coming up, a derby game as well, so lots of exciting games to come, but really a bit of deflation amongst the fans right now. First defeat in the league campaign this year, but for another couple of draws thrown in there. You talked earlier about the Bayern Munich game. I seen a stat that said 55% win rate since that good result away in Germany. So it's not just about today, it's about how we've underperformed since then, the mood around the club, and something needs to change fairly quickly. And I think a lot of that is around confidence, and whether it be the fans, whether it be the manager, whether it be the player. I think that there needs to be a collective change in the mood.
Yeah, there you go. That's it for today. I hope that was therapeutic in some way for you. I'll see you during the week for the build-up for that European game against Sturm Graz. Thank you.